Hello everyone, I'm the Saxy Gamer. Today we're here for yet another episode of Civilization 6 Tips, where today we're going to be talking about managing your tiles and making sure that you're getting the best yields out of the tiles that you have. So this is something that mainly comes into play in the early game whenever you are only working a few tiles, and thus you would want to know, which tiles you're working and making sure that you are getting the best ones that you can be working. So just to kind of start off here, if you don't know how to view the tiles that you're working, you can just go ahead and click on your city and click the little Manage Citizens button, and it'll show all these little icons. And as you can see, the ones that are highlighted are the ones that are being worked. So the tile that your city is on is always going to be worked. You cannot even unselect it if you want to. So that is just something that you are locked into doing. But you will get one additional citizen for each level of population that you have. So as you can see, we have one population, so we're working one other tile. It has defaulted to this 2-2 tile, so 2 food and 2 production, which generally is a pretty good thing because out of all these tiles, that is pretty much the best yield. There really is no reason to work, say, this jungle tile over this stone tile because it just has straight up worse yields. There is a choice that we have here, though, that is something that you might want to consider in the early game. And this mostly comes into mind whenever you are thinking about what your early game build order is. So I normally like to start with a scout, and then I like to go into a settler. There is a problem with that in this game, though, because you'll see that we're going to finish our scout in 6 turns, and then our city's going to grow in 7, which means after this scout finishes, we're not immediately going to be able to build our settler, because the city is still going to be at 1 population, and you need at least 2 population to produce the settler. So if I was in this case, what I would do is I would go ahead and I would click Manage Citizens, and I would change from this 2 food, 2 production tile to this 3 food tile. And we're going to have to just kind of move these guys around and just pick a tech. But you'll see now, whenever we advance the turn, this will update, and it's only going to take us 4 turns to grow now. I mean, sure, it is going to take us a few more turns to build the scout, but we will be able to then produce the settler after we finish producing the scout. And in the end, it will kind of even out with the scout as well, just because once the city grows, then we can work other tiles to get even more production. So I'll just go ahead and click through a few turns, and I'll see you back whenever this scout finishes. Alright, so the city has just grown, and I know I just said that I'll see you back when the scout finishes, but what I actually meant to say was when the city grows. So the city has now grown to be 2 population, which now if we go ahead and we click on Manage Citizens, we'll see that we are now working 2 tiles instead of just the 1. And it has defaulted to the 2-2 tile, which is a very good thing because none of these tiles are better than the 2-2 because they're all just straight up worse because they all have 1 less production than this 2-2 tile. So there are some things that we can see here. One thing that you can take a look at is that we're going to grow to this diamonds tile in 2 turns, and the diamonds tile is a fairly good one because it has 2 food, 1 production, and 3 gold. So as it is right now, I think I'll keep working these tiles because I'm pretty sure that even if I deselect this one, oh, okay, that's actually an interesting thing, and something that we can talk about. So in deselecting this tile, you'll see that the game automatically then went and transferred that citizen over to this 2 food and 1 production tile. And that's something that I wouldn't really consider to be all that worthwhile, because the 3 food is generally a little bit better in the early game, I think, because the more tiles you can work, then the more benefit you'll be able to get. So that also brings up another point of, until you unlock this tile, it will stay on this tile indefinitely. So if you maybe you only want to work a tile until you finish building a certain thing or until your city grows up or something like that, you do have to go in and manually deselect it. Otherwise, it will just be locked on this tile forever until you then go in and deselect it. So as it is right now, oops, I didn't want to do that. As it is right now, we are now working this 2 food, 1 production tile, and this 2 food, 2 production tile. And that is something that is fairly decent. However, in this case, I would probably prefer to work this 3 food tile, just because, like a little bit of early population can be something that's nice because that can get you to work more tiles, and that'll allow you then to work more good tiles whenever you have them in your borders. Alright, now you can see that our borders have expanded and we've gotten this gems tile, so I'm going to go ahead and check and just make sure that I am working that tile. Normally the game will prioritize tiles that have luxuries on them, which can be both a good and a bad thing for multiple reasons. So whenever we started this game, we saw that we were working this 2 food, 2 production tile, which is generally a pretty good thing. However, if we had started with this incense tile in our borders, normally the city would prioritize working a tile like this, and that's something that I don't normally like, because as you can see, this is only a 1 food, 1 production, 1 faith tile, which is, it's really just not good, because 1 food is pretty bad, 1 production is pretty bad, and 1 faith is still pretty bad. So if we had settled over here and had this in our borders at the start, the game would probably prioritize this tile, and that's something that I would highly advise against, unless maybe you really want that early Pantheon and you really want 1 faith per turn to start. That's something I would highly advise against. So whenever you settle, check to see which luxuries are in your borders, and check to see what yields they have, because the game will often try to work tiles like this when it's really just a lot worse than working a 2 food, 2 production tile, because this is almost infinitely better at the start than having 1 food, 1 production, 1 faith. So that is something to just keep in mind, that whenever you settle, just watch out for the luxuries that are in your tiles, and then you can kind of keep it up to your own judgment as to whether you really want to work that tile or not. Because sometimes it's okay, like this silk tile up here that has culture on it. Culture can be useful in the early game, but faith really, especially 1 faith, is really not that good. So that is something to just watch out for. And now I'd like to talk about one of the other use cases in which you would really want to manage your tiles, and that's if you're struggling with loyalty. So say we had just settled a city somewhere over here and it's struggling with loyalty, it's losing loyalty per turn. One of the things that we could do is we could then go in and manage our tiles to work more food, because if you've seen the in-depth video that I've done on loyalty, you'll know that loyalty pressure is entirely based on city population. So if you have cities that are struggling with loyalty, what you can do is you can go into your cities and you can select the tiles that are highest in food, because then that will cause your city to grow faster, gain more population, and thus exert more loyalty pressure. There is another way to do this, though, and it's something that I would like to point out. These little buttons down here, I know that there are actually quite a few people that don't know that these are buttons or that you can do stuff with these buttons. So with that loyalty example, a much easier way to just, get your city to grow as fast as you possibly can is to use these buttons. So if we go over this food, you can actually click this, and then it will say focusing citizens on food, and the city will automatically work the tiles that have the highest food output on them. You can also use this to maybe avoid food, and you would want to do this if maybe your city is struggling with amenities. You then don't want it to grow, because then it will require even more amenities, and then you'll be taking some other yield penalties if your cities are not having enough amenities. So that is a case that you would really want to be ignoring food, is if your city is struggling on amenities, or maybe if you're getting close to the housing cap or something like that, and you don't want it to grow too much more. That's another thing. But you can do this with all of the yields, so culture, food, production, science, faith, and gold. You can do it with any one of them. A lot of the times, though, these won't actually do too much, like with culture or science or anything, just because we don't have any tiles that have yields of culture or science or anything in our borders, so these generally won't do too much. The ones that I find to be particularly useful are food and production. You would use production if maybe you're going for a wonder and you want to make sure that you get that wonder as quickly as you can. You could then focus on production. It'll pick all the tiles that have the highest production on them, and then hopefully you can get your wonder a little bit faster. So just kind of in summary here, whenever you're starting off the game, you can go ahead and look at your citizen overview, and you can pick the tiles that you really want to work. It is mostly up to your own discretion. It is, especially for the first few turns, it is largely based on what build order you want to go, and when you want to have your city grow to size 2 of population, or maybe if you want to rush a few early game units, you don't really care about growing your city, so you just want to select the tiles with the highest production on them. Then later in the game, maybe if you're struggling with loyalty, you can use tile management to have your cities grow faster, which will then help to make sure that your cities will be exerting more loyalty pressure, which will help stabilize the loyalty of nearby cities. These buttons down here can be incredibly helpful for just focusing or ignoring certain things. This especially comes into handy in the later game whenever you're working a lot of tiles. So obviously if you're working 15 tiles because your city is size 15, you're not going to go in and manually select every tile that you want to work, because that would be an absolute nightmare. So in the late game, I highly recommend just using these down here. They are, they do give you a little bit less freedom than manually selecting tiles, but they are also a lot easier. In general, I don't really care about manually managing my tiles that much. Really in just like the first 15 or so turns, whenever individual yields can be really important, because maybe my city is only making 6 food, so 3 food versus 2 food is quite a significant difference. As the game progresses, though, this becomes a lot less useful and will have a lot less of an impact. So I wouldn't worry about it too much after maybe turn 50 or so. But in the early game, it is something that can make quite the difference between between keeping a game going or maybe getting wiped out early on, or getting an early advantage or not getting an early advantage. So I would highly recommend, at least in the first 20 or so turns, just pay attention to which tiles your citizens are working and make sure that the game is not doing anything stupid and working a terrible tile like this one. So thank you everyone for watching. I've been the Saxy Gamer. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you're looking for more Civilization 6 content, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.